Hero Officer. Tourists flee horse box chaos, averted as quick-thinking officer steps in. Small shops opened their shutters one by one, letting in streams of sunlight that danced across polished wooden floors. The scent of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner mingled with the aroma of brewing coffee from the nearby cafe, drawing early risers and curious passers-by. Children skipped along the pavement, their laughter ringing like tiny bells, while street musicians played soft tunes on violins and guitars, adding a pleasant rhythm to the morning air. In the heart of the city, a popular tourist area came alive with activity. It was a place where the charm of old streets met the excitement of visitors from all over the world. Cobblestone roads twisted gently between historic buildings, each with stories etched into their walls. Tourists strolled slowly, cameras in hand, capturing every detail of the picturesque surroundings. Families stopped to admire the intricate designs of street fountains, while friends posed together in front of colorful murals painted on building walls. The atmosphere was cheerful and carefree, filled with curiosity and delight. Among the attractions, one thing drew particular attention: horse-drawn carriages. They were a tradition in the area, and many tourists looked forward to the experience. The horses were strong and well-groomed, their coats shiny in the morning sun. Carriage drivers, dressed in smart uniforms with hats slightly tipped to one side, guided their horses with gentle commands and soft taps on the reins. The rhythmic clopping of hooves on cobblestone created a comforting, almost musical beat. Tourists would watch in awe, some whispering to each other about how beautiful the horses looked, while others snapped countless photographs to preserve the memory. The carriage stand was a hub of excitement. Children pressed their faces against the wooden barriers, pointing at the horses and squealing with delight. Parents smiled, holding their hands tightly, ensuring they wouldn't wander too close. Tourists from different countries chatted animatedly in various languages, some gesturing excitedly toward the horses, while others carefully read the information about tour routes and timings. Vendors nearby offered colorful souvenirs, tiny horse figurines, postcards, keychains, and local snacks. The air was alive with energy, the kind that makes people feel like anything is possible on such a perfect morning. A carriage waited patiently at the stand, its polished wooden panels gleaming under the sunlight. The horses attached to it were calm, their tails swishing gently, ears twitching as they listened to the sounds around them. Tourists lined up eagerly, shuffling forward, eager to get a ride and enjoy a unique view of the city streets. Among them was a family visiting from another country. The parents held their children's hands tightly, pointing out the sights they wanted to see. The children's eyes sparkled with wonder, every little thing seeming magical to them. The horses, the carriages, the cobblestone streets, and even the gentle flutter of pigeons overhead. Nearby, a group of friends had just arrived, laughing and joking as they adjusted their cameras and smartphones. They were excited, ready to explore, and eager to experience everything the city had to offer. The street corner buzzed with life, with locals going about their business, shopkeepers arranging colorful displays, cafe staff serving steaming cups of coffee and pastries, and street performers entertaining small crowds with juggling, music, and small acts of magic. The city seemed alive in a way that made every moment feel special, every sound and sight part of a living painting. Even the weather seemed to cooperate. The sky was a clear, bright blue, dotted with a few fluffy clouds that drifted lazily across the horizon. A gentle breeze carried the scents of fresh flowers from nearby gardens and parks, adding to the sensory delight. The sunlight made the colors of the buildings more vivid, the reds, yellows, and blues standing out against the soft beige of old stone walls. People moved slowly, savoring the beauty around them, taking their time to enjoy the calm and happy atmosphere. The carriage driver adjusted his hat and tapped his reins lightly, signaling the horses to move a little forward. The tourists shuffled, preparing to climb onto the carriage. Laughter and cheerful chatter filled the air as the driver welcomed each group with a warm smile and polite greeting. Some tourists paused for photos before stepping in, wanting to capture the memory of their first encounter with the elegant animals. Others simply gazed at the horses in awe, marveling at their strength and grace. It was a scene of simple joy, the kind that makes ordinary days feel extraordinary. Across the street, a few street artists painted quick sketches of passers-by, capturing their excitement and curiosity in bold lines and bright colors. A small child pointed at one of the sketches, giggling as the artist added the finishing touches. Nearby, a vendor offered freshly squeezed lemonade, its citrusy aroma mingling with the other smells of the morning. Tourists paused to buy a drink, chatting with each other in the soft, easy tone that comes when people are relaxed and happy. The entire scene was peaceful, a perfect blend of life, culture, and simple pleasures. Unbeknownst to anyone, the calm of the morning was temporary. Everything seemed perfect, almost as if time itself had slowed to allow everyone to enjoy the moment. Parents were focused on keeping their children safe, friends were busy capturing memories, and the horses stood quietly, seemingly aware of their importance in this lively scene. The city thrummed with gentle energy, its heart beating steadily and confidently. No one suspected that a sudden moment of danger was approaching, a test that would call for courage, quick thinking, and calm nerves. Even in this perfect morning, small signs went unnoticed. The horse that stood quietly at the carriage stand flicked its ears a little more than usual. Its nostrils flared briefly as it sniffed the air. The carriage driver, experienced and skilled, glanced at the horse and adjusted the reins subtly, ensuring everything was in order. But the day was so full of joy and light-hearted activity that no one noticed these tiny hints of tension. Everyone was caught up in the simple pleasure of a beautiful morning, the kind that makes you forget the world outside and focus only on the happiness of now. Tourists continued to move around, exploring every corner of the street. Some paused to admire flower boxes hanging from windows, while others bent down to watch a small squirrel scurry across the cobblestones. Children laughed as they chased each other around lampposts, and parents clapped their hands, encouraging their playful antics. The musicians played cheerful tunes, their notes floating through the air and blending with the sounds of conversation, footsteps, and the occasional bark of a dog. The city was alive, vibrant, and full of promise. Everything seemed perfectly normal, perfectly safe, and perfectly beautiful. The carriage waited, the horses stood patiently, and the tourists soaked in every sight, sound, and smell. It was the kind of morning that felt timeless, as if the world had paused to let everyone enjoy a moment of peace. Little did anyone know, this calm and joyful scene was only the beginning. Soon, the tranquility would be broken by a sudden burst of panic, and ordinary people would be called upon to act in extraordinary ways. And yet, in this moment, no one imagined what was about to happen. No one expected the horse to be startled, the tourists to scatter, and the chaos to erupt within seconds. The calm before the storm was still in place, like the pause before a sudden thunderclap. People laughed, took photos, and talked with each other, completely unaware that the story of their day, and perhaps even their lives, was about to change in ways they could never have anticipated. It was a morning of beauty, simplicity, and joy. The streets were alive, the sun shone brightly, and the horses stood patiently, waiting for their passengers. For now all was well, and the world seemed perfect, the kind of morning that makes a city feel magical, and every visitor feel like they had stepped into a storybook. The calm of the morning was suddenly broken by a sharp, unexpected sound. A loud clatter echoed through the cobblestone streets as one of the horses attached to a nearby carriage jolted. Its hooves struck the stone with a force that made people startle. Tourists froze, unsure what had caused the sudden noise. Children clutched their parents' hands tightly, their laughter fading into nervous whispers. The horse's ears twitched, and its eyes widened, reflecting fear and confusion. For a brief moment it pawed at the ground, its muscles tense and ready to spring forward. The carriage driver reacted quickly, trying to calm the horse with soft, low words and gentle tugs on the reins. But something in the air, or perhaps a sudden sound from a nearby construction site, had spooked the animal. It reared slightly, pulling against the reins with surprising strength. The carriage wobbled as the horses shifted their weight, and a few loose items inside the carriage rattled dangerously. Passers-by gasped and took a step back, sensing that something was not right. Tourists who had been standing close to the carriage began to move away, uncertainty in their eyes. Mothers picked up their children, holding them close, while fathers gently guided other family members toward safer spots. The sudden tension in the air made hearts race. Some people froze, unsure whether to run or stay, while others instinctively moved to protect themselves and those they loved. Street vendors stopped mid-task, their hands frozen over trays of colorful souvenirs and snacks, watching the scene unfold with concern. As the horse struggled against the reins, its movement became more unpredictable. Its legs kicked out slightly, and the carriage shifted in response, creating a wobbling motion that made those nearby take cautious steps backward. A man with a camera in his hand dropped it in shock, barely avoiding its fall to the ground. Nearby, a small group of tourists stumbled over each other in their attempt to move to safety, their soft screams mingling with the rising clatter of hooves. The cheerful music from the street performers was drowned out by the chaos, replaced by the rising tension of confusion and fear. The street, once lively and inviting, began to feel dangerous. The horses, normally calm and obedient, seemed to have a mind of their own. They pulled against the carriage with increasing force, and the wooden wheels creaked under the sudden strain. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed, unsure of what to do. Tourists from other countries, unable to understand the rapid instructions of the carriage driver, looked around helplessly. The vibrant energy of the morning had shifted into uncertainty and panic. A few brave individuals tried to help. A vendor set down his tray and stepped forward, waving his hands and calling out to the driver, but the distance made it hard for the instructions to be heard. A couple of onlookers raised their arms, hoping to get the horse's attention, but the animal was too agitated to notice. The crowd scattered, some moving toward nearby shops, others ducking behind parked bicycles or benches. The air was filled with the sounds of shouting, hooves clopping, and the occasional sharp cry of surprise. The horse's sudden movement caused the carriage to jerk forward slightly. A tourist who had been adjusting her camera lost her balance and nearly fell, only to be steadied by a stranger nearby. Another group of children, fascinated by the horses just moments before, clung tightly to their parents' hands, eyes wide with fear. The once peaceful morning had turned into a scene of confusion and alarm in a matter of seconds. Nearby shopkeepers quickly stepped outside to see what was happening. Their initial concern grew as they realized how close the horse and carriage were to pedestrians and street stalls. Some of them shouted warnings to the tourists, their voices filled with urgency. The noise of the commotion spread quickly, drawing more people from surrounding streets. Bystanders began forming small clusters, watching anxiously as the situation escalated. Despite the growing panic, a few people tried to remain calm. A young woman crouched near a fountain, encouraging her little brother to stay quiet and hold still. A father gently reassured his daughter, explaining that the situation was temporary and that they were safe as long as they moved carefully. Their attempts at calmness contrasted with the overall tension, highlighting the unpredictability of human reactions in sudden moments of crisis. The horses continued to pull at the carriage, their strength and agitation becoming more evident with each passing moment. The driver struggled to maintain control, shouting commands and tugging at the reins with all his might. Passers-by tried to anticipate the carriage's path, moving out of the way to avoid being struck. A few people stumbled over cobblestones in their haste, but fortunately, no serious injuries occurred yet. The scene was chaotic, a mix of fear, confusion, and hurried movements as everyone tried to find safety. The narrow street offered little room for error. Shop displays teetered as the crowd moved quickly to escape the unpredictable movements of the horses. A basket of colorful fruits nearly tipped over as a vendor ducked to avoid the carriage's sudden sway. A small dog barked furiously, tugging at its leash as its owner tried to carry it to safety. Every step the horses took seemed to create new waves of tension, and the sound of their hooves echoed loudly, amplifying the sense of urgency. Tourists who had moments ago been laughing and taking pictures now found themselves grappling with fear. An older couple, holding hands, carefully navigated around the chaos, their faces pale but determined. A group of teenagers, initially unsure of what to do, quickly realized the need to move in unison, guiding each other towards safer areas. The energy of the crowd shifted from curiosity to alertness, every person reacting instinctively to protect themselves and those around them. In the midst of the panic, the carriage driver finally managed to slow the horses slightly, but the animal's nervous energy had not yet been fully contained. Its movements remained unpredictable, and the carriage still swayed dangerously. The driver's face showed a mix of concentration and concern, aware that one wrong step could result in serious harm. Tourists watched anxiously, hoping for the situation to stabilize before it became worse. Amid the growing chaos, some strangers instinctively stepped forward to help. One man grabbed a loose rein, attempting to guide the horse while keeping a careful distance from its hooves. Another person tried to block the path toward a narrow alley, preventing anyone from accidentally stepping into danger. Their courage stood out against the backdrop of fear, small acts of bravery in a moment of uncertainty. The street seemed to hold its breath. For a brief moment, time slowed as everyone tried to anticipate the next move of the horse and carriage. The wind carried the sound of distant voices, shouting instructions and warnings. Children clung tighter to their parents, and adults kept one eye on the horse while moving carefully to safety with the other. The entire scene was a delicate balance of fear, caution, and hope, each person's actions contributing to the unfolding drama. The horse's movements began to gradually calm, though the tension was far from gone. The driver continued to issue soft commands, his voice steady and reassuring despite the adrenaline pumping through his body. Passers-by who had initially panicked started to regain composure, stepping carefully and observing the situation. Small victories, such as the horse slowing slightly or a child safely reaching a parent, brought fleeting relief to those involved. By now, it was clear to everyone that the situation had been serious. The horse's sudden fear had turned a peaceful morning into a moment of chaos, but the quick reactions of the driver, tourists, and bystanders prevented the scene from escalating into tragedy. The mixture of fear, concern, and courage created a memorable experience that none of the witnesses would soon forget. Even in the midst of panic, small acts of kindness and cooperation emerged. Tourists helped guide lost children back to their parents. Bystanders encouraged each other to move carefully, forming a makeshift chain of safety. The shared effort highlighted the best of human instincts, empathy, bravery, and cooperation, even when fear threatened to overwhelm. As the commotion continued, some calm began to return. The horse's movements became more predictable. The carriage stopped wobbling dangerously, and people slowly regained control of the situation. Parents reassured their children, strangers exchanged relieved smiles, and shopkeepers returned to their posts, keeping a watchful eye on the street. Though the memory of sudden panic lingered, the resilience and quick reactions of everyone involved ensured that no one was seriously hurt. By the time the situation was partially under control, the street had transformed from a place of serene morning activity into a scene of shared relief and cautious recovery. The incident reminded everyone present of how quickly life can change, how sudden fear can spread, and how courage and quick thinking can prevent disaster. Tourists who had moments ago feared for their safety now shared quiet smiles of relief, grateful to have experienced the day safely despite the chaos. The morning that had started with laughter, curiosity, and calm excitement had become a lesson in unpredictability, courage, and human resilience. While the memory of fear lingered in the minds of those who witnessed the event, the collective efforts of strangers, tourists, and the driver had ensured that the day continued without serious harm. It was a moment that would remain in their memories, a reminder that even in unexpected danger, quick thinking and cooperation could turn chaos into safety. Amid the chaos, a sharp whistle pierced the noise, cutting through the shouts and clatter like a beacon of control. A city officer, patrolling nearby, had noticed the commotion. At first, he had assumed it was just a minor incident, a tourist perhaps startled by a street performance or an accident involving a cart. But as he approached, he quickly realized the situation was far more serious. A horse-drawn carriage had become uncontrollable, the animal's panic radiating through the street, and tourists were scattering in every direction. The officer's heart raced, not with fear, but with urgency. He knew that in moments like these, quick thinking and decisive action could prevent disaster. He moved swiftly but deliberately, weaving through the crowd without adding to the panic. People instinctively stepped aside, recognizing the authority in his uniform and the calm determination in his stride. The officer's eyes locked onto the horse, noting its tense muscles, flared nostrils, and wide, fearful eyes. He observed the carriage driver struggling to maintain control, his hands gripping the reins tightly, but the horse's movements were unpredictable, and the carriage swayed dangerously. It was clear that without intervention, the situation could escalate into serious harm. The officer quickly assessed the scene. Tourists were clustered in small groups, some frozen in fear, others rushing to escape the unpredictable path of the carriage. Children were being held tightly by parents, their small hands gripping firmly as they tried to remain calm. Street vendors had dropped their trays or stepped back behind their stalls, watching anxiously. Every moment mattered. The officer knew he had to act decisively but also carefully, ensuring that his own movements would not spook the horse further. He approached the horse cautiously, speaking in a calm, measured voice. "Easy now, boy," he said, projecting calm confidence. His tone was gentle but authoritative, a balance that comes from years of training and experience. The horse's ears twitched toward him, its large eyes darting as it tried to understand the sudden human presence. The officer moved slowly, avoiding sudden gestures, carefully positioning himself between the horse and the most crowded part of the street. He knew that startling the animal further could cause it to bolt, and he had to prevent that at all costs. Meanwhile, the carriage driver continued to give commands, tugging at the reins and trying to guide the horse, but the officer's calm approach began to make a difference. The horse's frantic movement slowed slightly as it noticed the steady presence nearby. The officer adjusted his position, keeping the horse between himself and the largest group of tourists, creating a protective buffer. Every small gesture mattered. One wrong movement, one loud noise, and the panic could return. Nearby, a few tourists whispered words of encouragement, their voices soft and steady. Some tried to reassure the children in their care, explaining that the officer was helping and that they were safe as long as they stayed calm. The officer noticed this and allowed himself a small nod of appreciation. Even minor acts of composure helped keep the scene under control. Slowly but surely, the street began to respond to the officer's presence. The panic that had been spreading like wildfire began to ease, replaced by cautious attention. People started moving with care, giving the horse space to regain its composure. The officer's training kicked in as he guided the horse toward a safer position. He maintained eye contact with the animal, speaking softly and stroking its neck when he could reach it without risking injury. The horse's breathing was heavy, its muscles still tense, but it began to respond to the calm guidance. Step by step, the officer maneuvered the animal away from the densest part of the crowd. Tourists instinctively followed his lead, moving in the direction he indicated without hesitation. Children clung to parents, eyes wide but gradually losing some of their fear as they noticed the officer's confidence. At the same time, the officer kept one eye on the carriage. The wheels had nearly scraped against a nearby street stall earlier, and he knew that careful positioning was essential to prevent further accidents. He signaled to a few nearby bystanders, asking them to help guide tourists out of the immediate path. They complied quickly, recognizing the urgency of the situation. The officer worked methodically, combining human coordination with calm communication to restore order. Every step he took was deliberate, calculated to reduce risk while maintaining control. The horse, still tense but increasingly aware of the officer's steady presence, began to move more predictably. The officer continued to talk to it, his voice low and soothing. "That's it, boy. Easy now. We're okay." The repetition of calm words helped to reassure the animal, its ears flicking attentively and its head lowering slightly. The officer adjusted his hands on the reins, guiding the horse slowly in a wide arc that would take it away from the most crowded area of the street. Tourists watched in awe, realizing that this single person's focus and calm determination were the key to preventing disaster. In the crowd, murmurs of relief began to spread. People who had moments before been frozen in fear started to recognize that the danger was being managed. A mother whispered softly to her daughter, explaining that they were safe now, that the officer was helping. An elderly man, who had initially stumbled back in panic, regained his composure and helped guide a group of tourists toward a safe area. The officer's influence was spreading outward, restoring order not just through direct action, but through the confidence he inspired in those around him. The officer continued to guide the horse with patience and precision. He avoided any sudden movements, ensuring that the animal remained calm enough to respond to direction. The carriage driver, though still tense, relaxed slightly as he realized that the officer had the situation under control. He followed the officer's guidance, assisting when necessary but deferring to the trained expertise of the officer. Together, they worked as a team, balancing skill and calm presence to avert potential disaster. As the horse moved toward a safer position, the officer remained vigilant. He observed the surrounding environment, noting potential hazards such as uneven pavement, street furniture, and crowds of people who were still watching with concern. Every decision he made was deliberate, every movement calculated to reduce risk. He understood that one moment of inattention could undo all the progress made so far. Gradually, the chaos began to diminish. Tourists who had been scattered now formed small groups in safer areas, reassured by the officer's presence and guidance. Children stopped clinging so tightly to their parents, their curiosity slowly returning. Even the street vendors began to resume their work, though cautiously, keeping an eye on the horse and the officer. The atmosphere, once tense and frenzied, began to shift toward relief and admiration. People recognized the courage and quick thinking that had made the difference. The officer finally guided the horse to a quiet area, away from the densest part of the crowd. He maintained control, ensuring that the animal remained calm before allowing the carriage driver to take over fully. The horse's breathing began to steady, and its body relaxed slightly under the steady guidance. The officer gave a reassuring pat and a calm word, then signaled to the driver that it was safe to continue at a slow pace. The tension in the air eased further as the immediate danger passed. By now, the crowd had begun to settle. Murmurs of gratitude and admiration spread through the tourists and locals who had witnessed the event. People shared their amazement, whispering about the officer's bravery and quick thinking. Children, who had been frightened moments before, now watched with wide eyes and curiosity, noticing the calm authority that had prevented harm. The officer remained vigilant, keeping an eye on the street and the horse, ensuring that no unexpected movements would reignite the panic. The carriage driver, grateful and relieved, thanked the officer quietly, acknowledging the skill and courage that had prevented disaster. Tourists began to regain confidence, moving slowly back toward their intended paths, guided by the careful instructions of the officer and nearby bystanders. The morning, which had been shattered by fear and confusion, was gradually returning to order thanks to the calm, decisive action of one trained professional. The officer remained in place until the horse was fully under control, ensuring that every tourist, vendor, and bystander was safe. His focus never wavered, his presence a steady anchor in a previously chaotic scene. Once the immediate danger had passed, he allowed himself a small, satisfied nod, knowing that the quick thinking and courage displayed had made a real difference. Tourists approached him quietly, offering thanks and admiration, but the officer simply smiled and nodded, acknowledging their gratitude without fanfare. It was a moment that would remain in the memories of everyone present. A situation that had the potential for disaster had been averted by calm, focused action. The officer's presence had not only prevented harm, but had also inspired confidence and composure in those around him. The horse, once panicked and unpredictable, was now calm, guided safely by human skill and patience. And as the morning continued, the city slowly returned to its cheerful rhythm, the memory of chaos replaced by relief, admiration, and the quiet respect for those who act bravely when it matters most. The morning, once shattered by chaos, slowly began to regain a sense of order. The horse, guided with steady hands and calm words, now moved at a controlled pace, its muscles still tense but responding to the firm yet gentle direction. The carriage, which had once lurched unpredictably, now rolled smoothly over the cobblestones, the creaking of the wooden wheels much quieter than before. The officer remained close, his eyes alert, scanning the surroundings for any sign of renewed danger. The crowd, too, began to realize that the immediate threat had been mitigated. Tourists who had moments before been scattered in fear now found themselves gathering in small groups, their conversations a mixture of astonishment and relief. Parents held their children tightly, ensuring they felt safe, while quietly whispering explanations about what had just happened. "That man helped the horse," a mother said softly to her daughter. "He kept everyone safe." Children, still wide-eyed, listened carefully, some nodding with understanding, others clinging to their parents in quiet admiration of the calm figure who had controlled the chaos. The street, which had been filled with clattering hooves, shouting, and the nervous cries of frightened tourists, now hummed with a more measured energy. Shopkeepers began to step forward, placing trays of goods back in order, and sweeping up minor disruptions caused by the sudden panic. A vendor, whose basket of colorful fruits had tipped during the commotion, carefully rearranged the apples and oranges, grateful that no one had been hurt. Tourists, sensing that the danger had passed, began taking cautious steps back toward the carriage stand, some snapping photos as evidence of the extraordinary morning they had just witnessed. The officer remained at the center of the street, a steady presence guiding both the horse and the tourists. His calm confidence radiated outward, influencing the mood of everyone nearby. People instinctively followed his lead, moving in ways that avoided risk and maintained safety. A small group of teenagers who had been frozen in fear moments earlier now assisted in guiding younger children to the sides of the street, showing that the officer's example had inspired bravery even in those who had initially panicked. The carriage driver, breathing a little easier now, finally allowed himself to relax slightly. He had spent years managing horses in crowded streets, but the panic and sudden unpredictability of this incident had tested his skill in ways he had never imagined. He glanced at the officer, silently acknowledging the intervention that had prevented disaster. The two exchanged a brief nod of understanding, a silent agreement that the morning's chaos had been contained thanks to teamwork and quick thinking. As the officer guided the horse toward a quieter section of the street, he kept a careful eye on the tourists. Many were still shaken, their faces pale and expressions tense, but the officer's presence seemed to reassure them. He spoke calmly to those nearby, instructing them on how to move safely and encouraging them to maintain distance from the horse until it was fully calm. "Stay back," he said in a gentle but firm tone. "The horse is okay, but give it space." His words were clear, simple, and effective, immediately reducing the lingering fear that had gripped the crowd. The horse, responding to repeated soothing words and steady hands, began to relax more noticeably. Its ears flicked less, its muscles loosened slightly, and its breathing became steadier. The officer maintained control, guiding it in wide, careful circles to dissipate its remaining tension. Each step was deliberate, measured to prevent sudden movements, and each word spoken reinforced calm. Tourists and bystanders watched in awe, marveling at the patience and skill required to handle such a delicate situation. Gradually, the street began to regain its normal rhythm. Children laughed softly as they realized they were safe, their tiny hands held securely by parents who smiled in relief. Tourists cautiously returned to their exploration, though many paused to observe the officer's careful guidance. Some whispered to each other in admiration, recounting the moments of panic and the calm, decisive action that had prevented serious harm. Street performers, who had paused mid-performance during the chaos, resumed their music, their melodies weaving gently through the recovering crowd. Even the vendors, who had initially stepped back in concern, now returned to their work, displaying goods once more with careful attention to safety. One vendor offered a small basket of flowers to a young girl who had been frightened moments before, her face lighting up with a shy smile. Nearby, a cafe worker resumed serving steaming cups of coffee, nodding politely to the officer in gratitude. The city's heartbeat, which had skipped in fear, now resumed a steadier, more confident pace. The officer, having ensured the horse was calm and the carriage secure, allowed the driver to take the reins fully once more. The carriage moved slowly, the horse's pace steady, as it made its way back toward the stand. Tourists followed cautiously, maintaining a safe distance, their eyes still wide with amazement. The officer remained alert, walking alongside the carriage, ready to intervene if needed, but the tension in the air had eased considerably. People began to gather, expressing their gratitude in soft, heartfelt ways. A family approached the officer, the mother holding her child's hand as she spoke. "Thank you for helping us," she said, her voice filled with relief. "You saved us from something terrible." The officer nodded politely, a humble acknowledgement of the recognition, and replied simply, "I'm glad everyone is safe." His words were modest, but the calm and reassurance they carried spoke volumes to those around him. Children, who had been the most visibly frightened, began to ask questions in quiet, curious tones. "Is the horse okay?" one little boy asked, his eyes still wide with wonder. The officer knelt briefly, speaking softly to the child while also gesturing to the horse. "Yes," he said, "the horse is fine now. It just got scared, but everything is safe." The boy nodded, a small smile forming as he slowly relaxed. Parents thanked the officer once more, grateful not only for the safety provided, but also for the calm guidance that had prevented panic from spreading further. The street, now largely restored to normal, retained a quiet sense of respect for what had just occurred. People spoke softly among themselves, recounting the moments when fear had taken hold and marveling at the officer's quick thinking. The combination of calm authority and patient action had transformed what could have been a disaster into a controlled, safe situation. The city, which had moments ago teetered on the edge of chaos, now hummed with the gentle rhythm of everyday life. Nearby, a small group of tourists lingered, taking careful photographs of the horse and carriage, capturing the memory of a morning that had tested both fear and courage. A young woman whispered to her friend, "I've never seen someone handle a situation like that." "He's amazing." The friend nodded, still processing the rapid events. Children watched with fascination, their earlier fear replaced by curiosity and admiration. The officer's presence had not only prevented harm, but had also left a lasting impression on those who had witnessed his actions. The carriage driver guided the horse back to the stand, its hooves now moving in a steady rhythm. The officer walked alongside, ensuring the final approach remained calm and controlled. Tourists slowly followed, maintaining a safe distance, while the crowd's energy shifted from panic to quiet appreciation. The morning's excitement, though initially terrifying, had become a story of courage, calm, and the ability to act effectively under pressure. As the horse reached the stand, the officer ensured that the carriage was fully stable and that the tourists were safely disembarking. He offered gentle guidance to the passengers, helping children step down carefully and ensuring that parents had control of their little ones. Each movement was deliberate and careful, reinforcing a sense of security that had been missing only moments before. The officer's patience and attention to detail allowed the tourists to regain confidence, turning fear into a lesson of trust and reassurance. Once the horse was secure and the carriage safely returned, the officer finally allowed himself a brief pause. He looked around the street, noting the returning smiles, the relaxed chatter, and the resumption of normal activity. The music of the street performers floated gently once more. The clatter of carts was replaced by the gentle hum of footsteps and conversation, and the vendors' colorful displays gleamed invitingly in the sunlight. The city, having experienced a moment of tension and fear, now basked in the quiet relief of safety restored. Tourists, street vendors, and locals alike recognized the significance of what had just occurred. The officer's calm and decisive actions had transformed a potentially dangerous situation into a controlled, safe outcome. The horse, once panicked, now stood quietly at the stand, calm and steady, a testament to the skill and patience that had guided it through the morning's chaos. Children waved gently, their earlier fear replaced by admiration, and parents expressed gratitude in quiet, heartfelt tones. The morning continued, but the memory of the incident lingered. People would recount the story of the horse, the carriage, and the quick-thinking officer for days to come. The lessons of courage, calm, and careful action were clear to everyone who had witnessed it. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light across the streets, the city once again embraced the simple pleasures of the day, now with a deeper sense of appreciation for the quiet heroes among them. The street, which had only moments ago been filled with panic and fear, was now calm and quiet. The sunlight shone warmly on the cobblestones, reflecting off the polished wooden carriages and casting soft shadows on the nearby buildings. Tourists, still carrying the memory of the sudden chaos, moved slowly and carefully, their footsteps measured as they walked through the area. Children held tightly to their parents' hands, sometimes glancing at the officer with wide eyes, as if searching for reassurance. The atmosphere had shifted from chaos to relief, but the memory of the morning's events lingered in every thoughtful glance and whispered conversation. The officer stood near the horse-drawn carriage, his posture calm but alert, ensuring that everyone remained safe. Passers-by watched in quiet admiration, recognizing the skill, patience, and courage that had been required to manage the tense situation. Even as life around him resumed its usual rhythm, the impact of his actions was evident in the expressions of those who had witnessed the events. There was a shared understanding that, without his intervention, the morning could have ended very differently. Tourists began to gather slowly, some approaching the officer to express their gratitude. A young couple, holding a child in their arms, thanked him softly, their voices filled with relief and admiration. "We don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in," the mother said, her voice trembling slightly. The officer smiled modestly, shaking his head. "I'm just glad everyone is safe," he replied, his tone calm and reassuring. His humility contrasted with the extraordinary bravery he had shown, and those around him sensed the depth of his professionalism. Local shopkeepers, who had witnessed the events unfold from their doorways, stepped outside to offer their thanks as well. A vendor who had been standing near a fruit stall earlier in the morning came forward, holding a small bouquet of flowers as a gesture of appreciation. "You saved the day," he said quietly. "We were all so frightened, but you kept everyone calm." The officer accepted the flowers with a gentle nod, acknowledging the gesture with respect and gratitude, but quickly refocused his attention on ensuring the horse remained steady and calm. Children, who had been the most visibly frightened during the chaos, now watched the scene with fascination. Some of them had wide eyes filled with curiosity rather than fear, and a few cautiously approached the horse to see it up close. The officer allowed them to observe from a safe distance, explaining softly how the horse had been scared but was now calm and safe. He spoke with patience, answering questions and reassuring the children that the situation was under control. "The horse was just nervous," he said. "It needed someone calm to guide it, and now everything is fine." As the morning progressed, the story of the incident began to spread among the tourists and locals. People who had witnessed the events recounted them to friends and family, describing the officer's quick thinking and calm presence. "He didn't panic at all," one tourist said. "He knew exactly what to do, and he saved us from something dangerous." Others nodded in agreement, adding their own observations about how the officer had maintained order while keeping everyone safe. It became clear that his actions had left a lasting impression on everyone present. Nearby, the carriage driver, now fully relaxed, took a moment to speak with the officer. His voice was filled with gratitude. "I've managed horses for years, but I've never seen someone handle a situation like this with such calm and precision," he said. The officer smiled gently. "You did your best," he replied. "We just worked together to make sure everyone stayed safe." The driver nodded, clearly appreciative of the acknowledgement, and both men shared a quiet moment of respect and understanding. The crowd began to thin as tourists resumed their exploration of the city, though many glanced back at the officer and the horse with admiration. Parents encouraged their children to stay close, often recounting what had happened in soft, reassuring tones. "Remember the man who helped the horse," one mother said to her child. "He made sure everyone was safe." Children nodded, absorbing the lesson of calm and bravery, and some even expressed a desire to help others in the future, inspired by the officer's actions. Local media, which had arrived to cover the story, began interviewing witnesses. Tourists shared their experiences, emphasizing the fear they had felt and the relief that followed the officer's intervention. Street vendors described how the situation had disrupted their morning and how they had been grateful for the calm presence that restored order. Reporters noted the officer's professionalism and composure, highlighting how his quick thinking had prevented potential harm. Photographers captured images of the horse and the officer standing calmly, symbolizing control and reassurance after a morning of tension. As the day continued, the officer took a moment to reflect on the events himself. He understood the importance of remaining calm in emergencies and recognized that his actions had not only prevented injury, but it also set an example for those who had witnessed the chaos. He thought about the children who had been frightened, the tourists who had looked to him for guidance, and the bystanders who had followed his lead. Each reaction reinforced the lesson that patience, careful observation, and decisive action can make a real difference when danger arises unexpectedly. The horse, now calm and obedient, stood quietly at the carriage stand, its ears twitching occasionally as it observed the crowd. The officer ensured it was properly secured and comfortable, gently patting its side and speaking soothingly. Tourists gathered nearby to take a closer look, some cautiously asking questions about the horse's behavior and care. The officer explained in simple terms how horses react to sudden noises or movements, emphasizing that fear is natural but can be managed with calm guidance and patience. His explanation helped people understand the situation better, transforming a moment of fear into a lesson in empathy and understanding. Local authorities began to arrive, commending the officer for his swift and effective response. Supervisors praised his ability to maintain control under pressure and recognized the positive impact he had on both the tourists and the local community. Colleagues approached him with quiet admiration, sharing their relief that no one had been hurt. The officer remained humble, acknowledging the recognition, but emphasizing the importance of teamwork and vigilance. He credited the cooperation of the crowd, the careful guidance of the carriage driver, and the calm responses of the tourists as key elements in resolving the situation safely. By mid-morning, the street had fully returned to normal. Tourists continued their exploration, vendors resumed their work, and children played nearby with cautious freedom. The incident, while frightening in the moment, had become a story of heroism, patience, and the quiet power of calm action. People continued to speak about the officer's bravery, recounting the tension, fear, and ultimate relief with vivid detail. Children were inspired by his actions, parents felt reassured about the city's safety, and tourists carried the memory of the day as a story to tell for years to come. As the sun climbed higher, casting long, warm shadows across the streets, the officer finally allowed himself to step back. He observed the scene with satisfaction, noting how the horse was now calm, the carriage stable, and the crowd gradually dispersing. The incident had tested his skills, patience, and ability to remain composed, but it had also demonstrated the power of steady, thoughtful action in preventing harm. He felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that the morning's chaos had been transformed into a safe, orderly, and even inspiring conclusion. Even after the crowd had dispersed, the story of the morning remained alive. Children continued to recount the events to each other, emphasizing the officer's bravery and calm demeanor. Tourists shared their experiences on social media, highlighting the remarkable way the situation had been handled. Local shopkeepers and residents spoke of the officer with respect and admiration, knowing that his quick thinking had protected not only the tourists, but also the reputation of their city as a safe and welcoming place. In the quiet moments that followed, the officer reflected further on the broader lessons of the day. He thought about how quickly fear can spread, how easily a peaceful morning can turn into chaos, and how much difference a single calm and decisive person can make. The morning's events reinforced his understanding that being prepared, observant, and patient is essential in any situation where lives or safety may be at risk. He also recognized that courage is not always loud or dramatic. Often, it is quiet, steady, and careful, like the guidance he had given to the horse and the crowd. As the day moved forward, life returned to its normal rhythm. Tourists continued to explore, vendors conducted their business, and children played safely in the streets. The horse, once tense and frightened, now stood quietly, a symbol of the calm that had been restored. The carriage driver resumed his duties with renewed confidence, aware of the importance of vigilance and careful handling. and the officer, having ensured that everything was safe and orderly, finally allowed himself to move on, leaving behind a scene of gratitude, respect, and reflection. The memory of the morning would remain long after the sun had set. People would remember the fear, the panic, and the remarkable calm that had prevented harm. Children would recount the story to friends, tourists would share it with family, and local residents would continue to speak of the quiet hero who had stepped in at just the right moment. It was a reminder that even in moments of fear and uncertainty, patience, courage, and quick thinking can create safety, calm, and hope for everyone involved. By the end of the day, the city streets had returned to their familiar rhythm, yet the impact of the incident lingered. The officer's actions had not only prevented potential harm, but had also left a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed them. People walked with a renewed sense of appreciation for safety, for calm action, and for those who quietly protect others when danger arises unexpectedly. The morning's events had been a test of courage, patience, and humanity, and the officer had passed with distinction, leaving behind a story of heroism, reflection, and the quiet triumph of steady, compassionate action.